morning everyone. Today I'm going to be welcoming you all to my presentation. This is a dissertation presentation session. Today the topic that I'm going to be focusing on is obstacles against developing communicative competence for the in spoken English for the undergraduate level students, and this is an exploratory study. So welcome to my slides. The first slide, as you can see, it's a dissertation. The title is Obstacles Against Developing Communicative Competence in Spoken English at the Undergraduate Level, and Exploratory Study. My supervisor is Monjur Alam, Associate Professor, Institute of Modern Languages, University of Chittagong. And this is me, J.D. Milton, MNELT, roll number is this, and IML, University of Chittagong. So I'm coming to this, the next slide, as I mentioned about why this study. John Schumann, at University of California, he is a professor and a renowned linguist. He has done a long-term 10-month research on Alberto, and this inspired me a lot to find out the limitations and obstacles. Why do the learners fail to develop speaking ability? So the story of Alberto goes like this. Alberto was one of the Costa Rican 33-year-old learner who was the most unsuccessful learner to John Schumann. John Schumann has found that all the learners became successful in completing English language and developing linguistic competence. But Alberto is the one who was very unsuccessful in learning. He could not even develop the basic syntactic pattern of English sentences. Therefore, he has done a research and found out 12 vital factors. 8 factors were social factors and 4 factors were psychological factors, which inspired me a lot to work on this study. And another professor, Jack C. Richards, once in one of the videos talked about linguistic competence and cognitive competence. Linguistic competence actually refers to the ability to create accurate sentences. On the other hand, cognitive competence refers to the skill to use the sentences in appropriate situation. So that inspired me to work on cognitive competence. So John Schumann and Professor Jack C. Richards inspired me to work on this study. And Professor Jack C. Richards talked about 5 strengths of cognitive competence: accuracy, fluency, complexity, appropriacy, and capacity. Accuracy refers to the appropriate use of language. Fluency refers to the ability to avoid pauses and how do you process the words per minute. Then complexity refers to how much you can develop and work on the syntactic pattern in a communicative system. Appropriacy refers to when and where to say the sentences. And capacity refers to the ability to talk and discuss and continue, and the ability to express one's own feeling in the language. My next slide shows the pictures of Professor Jack C. Richards and John Schumann, as you can see. And the very important factor, cognitive competence. So usually when we talk about what a language learner is asked, what is the goal of a language course, everybody will talk about simply vocabulary and grammar. On the other hand, when they are asked what is their goal to learn the language, they will definitely respond that they want to develop communicative skill. So I'm not saying that actually the goal of a language course is to teach completely grammar and vocabulary. Now in modern context, when you teach grammar and vocabulary, the successful students get less and unsuccessful students develop more in that case. Fortunately, the focus of second language teaching has moved purely from teaching grammar and vocabulary to effective communication. So definitely the goal of any language goes to speaking. So if you just broadly talk about cognitive competence, Dale Hymes in 1966 is the first one who coined the term cognitive competence in reaction to Noam Chomsky 1965 linguistic competence. So actually cognitive competence is the language use, and linguistic competence is the like the skill developments. So when a child develops any language, he or she usually know where to say, how to say, when to say, something like this. So this is the practical part of reality. So in other words, Cannell and Swain in 1980 talked about a very important factor. They talked about 4 strengths of competence. Number 1 is linguistic competence, which refers to the ability to use words, sounds, and sentences in a correct form. Then sociolinguistic knowledge, which refers to the social, regional, and stratification variation, like according to the situation and society, which sentences will be appropriate. Discourse competence refers to very important factor, like how the messages put together to make the text possible and conversation successful. On the other hand, strategic competence simply refers to the ability to produce, comprehend, and to talk. It shows the strategies for organizing knowledge and gaining more language. So communicative competence as a whole just focuses on the 4 components of language as mentioned by Dale Himes on communicative competence in an article. So my background research and questions were very important, that I have gone through a lot of articles. There I have seen from Mahamud Debnath and article, they mentioned that most of the students from school and college leaving examinations fail in English. Basically they are from rural areas. In reality, what happens, they learn reading, writing, and grammar. On the other hand, speaking and listening skill is totally avoided. This is mentioned by Chaudhary and Farooqi. And the goal of language teaching is to develop what Himes referred to, communicative competence. So my research questions were, why do most of the learners fail to develop speaking proficiency in English language? Is it the poor background that they come with? Number 2 was, what makes academic education less helpful to develop communicative competence in English at ESL or EFL classrooms? Is it the curriculum that they follow? And the third question was, how do sociocultural and psychological factors seem responsible for causing failure in developing communicative competence in English as a second language? Are social limitations, mental problems, religious problems, or cultural gaps responsible? So there I talked about it. So the main causes or barriers to develop communicative competence, according to Brown and Eel, they mentioned very nicely: incomplete sentences, very little subordination, generalized vocabulary, then the use of pauses and fillers. All these factors, they have found out that they are responsible for the failure or barrier to develop speaking. On the other hand, Jack C. Richards and Rogers in 2001 mentioned very, very important 4 factors. Number 1 is excessive use of mother tongue, that is poor proficiency in English. Anxiety, that is lack of motivation and confidence. Third factor was family background. So from the family, there was no support, learning innovation took place. The fourth one is improper listening skill, that is lack of proper vocabulary. So these 4 factors seem quite interesting, and they're really going to be helping me in my study as well. So there are more barriers to develop communicative competence. Pattison mentioned that students actually lack transfer skill from first language to second language, and Sui in 1996 referred the students as reluctant speaker. Like most of the students do not want to speak in English because he mentioned 5 reasons. Number 1 was students perceive themselves to be a very low proficient student, and number 2 is they worry about making mistakes and become the laughing factor for others, and the third one is teachers are not tolerant of silence, and the fourth one is turn taking, like when the good students are talking much and the less advanced students are talking less. And the fifth one is input, that is instruction is incomprehensible to the students. And there are more other barriers to develop community competence. So I'm just generalizing it. According to the Luthanian education, there are three vital factors: economic changes, social changes, and pedagogical changes affect to the barriers to develop cognitive competence. And Cinco mentioned that in 2002, lack of support for educational personal learners, lack of teacher competencies, insufficient financing, and lack of cooperation among academic personnel. On the other hand, Lai in 2001 mentioned lack of competencies, limited accessibility, lack of support, shortage of time, and change process. These are the factors responsible. So CLT appeared in Bangladesh just in 1996, which appeared in England in 1970s. This is CLT actually, this is the ability to use the language in a social context, and discourse competence, developing discourse competence is the main target. Savignon in 1983 proposes that a classroom model of communication cognitive competence should include these four components, maintains that they're interrelated, so they can neither be developed or measured separately. So all these skills, discourse competence, linguistic competence, then strategic competence, everything together, they cannot be separated from each other. It is like stringing beads of one on a necklace, as he mentioned in cognitive competence. So if you talk about CLT, it's a generic approach, and role play, interview, information gap activities, games, language exchanges, pair work, group work, all this is involved in cognitive language teaching. The syllabus is basically notional and functional syllabus. That is, the application of language is taught, and the teachers become the facilitator. They do not directly become the director of a classroom. Moriam Farhad, PhD scholar, mentioned about it. This is really interesting. And in the context of Bangladesh, grammar translation method is the one which is followed, aiming to develop the grammatical knowledge. On the other hand, Hamid and Boldov mentioned about aiming to develop learners' cognitive competence in English, which is the target of CLT. But as CLT appeared in Bangladesh, it was expected that the weak learners will develop in English, but it was far from satisfaction, as mentioned by Hamid, Rashid, and Boldov Rahman in 1999 and 1991. So CLT has become a considerable debate in the context of Bangladesh. So my research method was a mixed method, and I followed qualitative and quantitative method. And a sample were collected both in close-ended questionnaires and open-ended questionnaires, along with recorded interviews. Participants were 5 teachers and 20 students. Data collection procedure were primary data collected from the teachers and students, and questionnaires and interview were my research tools. And I have used 3 educational institutions: Gurudal Government College, Chittagong, Southern University, Bangladesh, Chittagong, and Coxsazar Government College, Coxsazar. So this is really going to be, so the teachers that I have used: Pankaj Barua, ex-lecturer, Department of English, Southern University; A.K. Mazharul Haq, Associate Professor, Department of English, Gurudal Government College; Mohammad Tahir Selim, Assistant Professor, Department of English, International Islamic University, Chittagong; and Mithun Chakraborty, lecturer, Department of English, Coxsazar Government College; and Hasna Hurain Chaudhuri, guest lecturer, Department of English, and she is also a lecturer in Commerce College, Coxsazar. So I have analyzed the students' questionnaire response. The first question was, I have taken only 3. First question was, how many percentage of speaking classes, speaking lessons do you find in English course? Among 20 students, 40% responded in favor of 20 to 39% approximately. On the other hand, 20% student opined in favor of 0 to 19%, and 0% student provided their opinion on 80 to 100%. So it means that speaking classes are usually given less to the students. Second question that I have taken here: how often the teachers ask and answer questions in the classroom? 40% students responded that not much, 25% hardly, not sure, 20% said hardly, 10% said sometimes, and very much said 5%. It means close to 85% students believe that the teachers do not ask questions in the class in English. As a result, their speaking ability do not develop. The third question that I have gone through is how comfortable the students are in case of speaking English in general. 15% said not much, 15% said not sure, hardly said 10%, sometimes said 35%, and very much said 25%. So it means close to 75% students are not comfortable in speaking English. So my next question was, what was the most preferable skill in English for the students? What a student likes about English? 40% responded that they like speaking. Then 20% responded on writing, and the others responded on listening and reading. But you see, speaking is the one where most of the students prefer. Reading, writing, and listening, these are just total 50%. So it means speaking is more preferable skill to the students. And when I come to the teacher's close-ended questionnaire, so I asked them, what is the main area of difficulty in case of speaking? 40% teachers preferred in favor of accuracy. And equally 20% response were given to vocabulary, pronunciation, and fluency. So it means that accuracy is the main problem for most of the students. And when I went to the next question, the availability of time in speaking, 60% teachers express that they get very short time, and 40% teachers express their opinion of less time, and no teacher express their opinion of much or little bit. So the other question which comes, the main area of difficulty while speaking in English. So the teachers responded that 40% students fail to be accurate. On the other hand, fluency, pronunciation, and vocabulary equally 20%. So accuracy is one of the vital criteria for speaking failure. So limitation of this study is that students have performed better outside classroom. Teachers simply gave their opinion and were reluctant to respond slowly. The study has periods of breakdowns. Teachers or students from public universities may provide different results. Only 20 students and 5 teachers were involved, although it requires more participants. Another set of teachers or students might give different results. The strength of this study is that 3 different educational institutions have been chosen from 3 different parts of Bangladesh. The researchers have had administrative support. It means I got support from the authority. Students have been the real trainees of the researcher. That means they are my real students. Teachers were actually working with the researcher in the field of English language. The teachers who have given the opinion in this research, most of them were my colleagues. The study has been conducted in long-term session under the guidance of the supervisor, and the findings were verified and based on real first-hand experience. Summary of the findings. Most of the students feel shy while they are speaking. There is a problem with the curriculum and syllabus design, lack of practice, confidence. Teachers do not speak English even in the classroom. Social, financial, academic, and cultural limitations were also there. So if I summarize everything together, the obstacles against developing communicative competence, I discovered 4 different areas. Number 1 was academic. There is no scope to practice speaking skill outside class. Authority do not have any system to conduct students speaking tests. Teachers are not well trained. They do not speak English even in the class. Personal problem. 2, students feel shy or afraid while speaking. And influence of local accent of mother tongue leads to pronunciation failure. And social problem is lack of comfort, rather stress is another issue for the cause of failure. Absence of social support and friendly environment for practice in English is also another reason. Psychological factor, lack of motivation, confidence, and positive attitude. And last thing, which is extremely important, most of the speakers seem to be reluctant speakers. They lack interest of speaking in English, and they prefer speaking in Bangla. Alright, before finishing my presentation, I'd like to discuss about the results of speaking test. I have taken interviews from the students. There I have found out that pauses and repetition of the same sentences was number 1. Influence of local accent of mother tongue. Limitation with clear pronunciation of words. Low voice while speaking. Extra linguistic features like nervousness, lack of confidence, slip of tongue, stress were in effect. And listening and understanding limitations were also discovered. Inability to apply creative sentences in English. When I asked them some sort of descriptive question, they were unable to produce many sentences. They just provided me the sentences that they are habituated with. The last thing is fragments or very short responses are frequently visible. Now I'm going to be showing you one of the interviews that I've conducted from a student. As you can see the video. This is one of the videos that I have taken. This is recorded speech.
What's your name?
I am Abu Mustafa.
How many members do you have in your family?
So we have 5 members in my family.
Who are they?
They are my elder sister, me, my younger sister, my father, and my mother.
Among all the members, whom do you like most?
Obviously, it's my mother's son.
Why?
Because I remember a story. Before 15 years ago, I suffered a stomachache, severe stomachache, and my father wasn't my home, and my mother sold earrings, golden earrings, and ran the treatment.
I'd like to just finish the last session with Professor Jack C. Richards, his idea of cumulative competence.
Hello again. Today I'd like to say a little bit more about communicative competence and what communicative competence in a foreign language entails. I'd like to identify 5 strands of communicative competence that are important in teaching and that help, I think, help understand what the differences are between a basic, intermediate, and advanced level speaker. These are accuracy, fluency, complexity, appropriacy, and capacity. Now, let's look at each of these in turn.
Thank you very much for listening to the presentation, and I hope that you will subscribe my channel and like my video and provide a constructive comment over the presentation. I hope this was successful, but I guess it depends on the teachers. Thank you very much for listening to me by spending your valuable time.